everybody, and welcome to another Biology with Miss Judd. Now, I'm sure everyone's had this experience where you're just sitting there playing a game and you've thought to yourself, I wonder what my skin cells are doing right now. Everyone's thought it, don't worry, totally normal. If you remember, as part of the cell theory, we are all made up of cells. All living things are made up of at least one or more cells. Many multicellular organisms, like us, have cells that work together. They work together as part of body tissue, and then body tissues work together as part of organs, and organs work together as part of an organ system. Essentially, our cells are specialized to work on these different levels of organization. We have skin cells, we have stomach cells, we have muscle cells, and they all have functions that need to be regulated. These cells are regulated as part of something called the cell cycle, which is lesson 2. And that kind of relates to my question of, I wonder what my cells are doing right now. Cells themselves can grow larger. However, most multicellular organisms, it isn't growing because each individual cell is getting bigger. A multicellular organism itself grows by making more cells, and the cells make more cells by dividing. So that's what our lesson today is on, the cell cycle and mitosis. One reason that you're bigger than you were when you were 5 years old is because your cells have divided to make more cells, unless you're actually 5 years old, which I don't think you are. Mitosis and the cytokinesis that follows to split the cytoplasm allows you to make new body cells. Still, we don't want this cell division to happen all the time because that is called cancer, which we have heard the term cancer before. And as I've told you, I have a family member who is currently working to battle cancer. It's definitely a relevant topic for all of us. Cancer, in part, is due to cells that divide too frequently. Cancer cells are not regulated, they are uncontrolled. Before we can dive into how the cell cycle goes wrong, we need to know what the cell cycle done right looks like. The main goal of this mitosis is 2 identical cells. Now, we are going to be taking some notes on this, so make sure that you have your guided notes ready. Remember that handwriting is so important. We want to use our brains as best as possible. Now, our goal is 2 identical cells, which means that we need the information to run 2 identical cells, which means that I need to send it to a new character on Biology with Miss Judd called Ghost Miss Judd. Now, this isn't a spooky ghost. Think more like the friendly ghost. Ghost Miss Judd is going to talk to us about DNA, chromosomes, and what is going on in order to control mitosis.
Hi, you guys. Miss Judd, the friendly ghost, here to talk about this mysterious thing called a chromosome. Now, you might be asking yourself, Ghost Miss Judd, why are we even talking about this thing? This sounds complicated. When our cells go through this process of cell division, we need DNA to be condensed down or squished together so that it doesn't get tangled or damaged. Our DNA is our genetic information, meaning our code for everything about ourselves, who we are, how we act, what we look like is in our DNA. We do not want that to get damaged. That is bad news bears if part of that gets lost. Now, our DNA is held inside of this organelle called a nucleus. Our nucleus is inside our cell. Inside of that nucleus is our DNA. And we have a lot of DNA. It's our code for everything. So it becomes a chromosome. DNA becomes organized and condensed, think squished, into these chromosomes that are made up of DNA and proteins. Think like packaged DNA. That's my chromosome. So if we were to take a look at this big picture, we have our cell. Inside of our cell, we have our nucleus. Inside of our nucleus, we have our chromosomes. And inside of our chromosomes, we have our DNA with all of our genetic information. Now, if we are going to make 2 new cells in mitosis, which is the goal, we are going to need 2 sets of DNA, one for each cell. This replication of genetic material happens before the cell splits. One chromosome is composed of 1 DNA molecule. Following replication, each chromosome is composed of 2 DNA molecules, right? You replicate 2. Each of these is called a chromatid. So looking at this image, we start with 1 chromosome. We replicate our DNA and we have 2 chromatids, each one has two DNA molecules. After this process of cell division, we go back to just one. Again, this whole purpose of a DNA becoming a chromosome is to prevent DNA from tangling and damaging during cell division.
Awesome. Thanks, Ghost Miss Judd. Now we are ready to dive into mitosis and the cell cycle. Remember, our goal is 2 cells that are identical. I'm going to send it up to Miss Judd in the corner so we can do this.
Hi, you guys. Miss Judd in the corner here to talk about lesson 2, the cell cycle and mitosis, which I'm really excited about because it's super relevant. To jump in, when we are talking about the cell cycle, we're talking about it for some pretty important reasons. Our bodies go through this all the time. We are growing from baby to adult. We need more cells. Our cells are not just growing larger, they're actually dividing to create more of a body. To repair, when we get a paper cut on our finger, we need more cells to fill that cut. It repairs the broken cells. And then 3, replacement. When cells die, they need to be replaced. That's why we shed our hair. That's why our skin is coming off all the time. Now, when this goes wrong, for example, skin cancer is the abnormal growth of skin cells. They don't know when to stop making more, and this creates a tumor. We're going to dive into this at the end of the lesson, and also next class, we're going to do a case study. So what is the cell cycle? What is the cycle? Typically, it's represented with a pie chart, which you see here down in the corner. Now, as it moves through this pie chart, you can kind of see what the cell is doing throughout the different pieces of the cell cycle. It's often in either one of 2 phases. They are either in a phase called interphase, which is where the cells are preparing for the division. So they're growing, they're replicating their DNA, and then doing just their typical cell functions. And then they are in M phase, which is mitosis, which if you look, it's the smallest part of this pie chart. This is when the division of the nucleus is occurring, and then cytokinesis, which is when the actual cell splits, the cytoplasm of the cell splits. So M phase is where the cells are actually dividing to make more cells. Still, most of the cells are spending their time in interphase. So most of the times our cells are not dividing, instead they're preparing. Interphase is the period of growth between cell divisions, and that can be broken down into 3 parts. G1 is when the cell is growing. It's copying its organelles and its proteins. It's being a cell. S phase is when all of the DNA is copied. In order to make 2 new cells, we need 2 sets of DNA, and that happens in S phase. And then G2. G2 is where it's preparing to divide, making those final preparations, making sure everything's okay before we actually go through the intense process of mitosis. Mitosis is that division of the nucleus. And we can split it up into 4 parts: prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. Think PMAT. Prophase is when DNA condenses. The chromosomes become visible. This means that our DNA can split easier. Think if it's just a ball of yarn, trying to pull that apart, super difficult. Can't do it. But if it's condensed down, we can pull those apart easier. Our spindles appear. That's what these gray little strings are. We start to see these spindles. And our nucleus disappears. This green thing goes away in prophase. You are going to write and draw this. After our chromosomes become visible and our nucleus disappears, we move into metaphase. This is when our chromosomes line up the center of the cell. The spindles attach to each chromosome. So this is where my spindles really become important. They're attaching to each chromosome as it's lined up in the middle. Metaphase, middle. We move into anaphase. My chromosomes move to opposite ends of the cell. So my spindles are pulling my chromosomes apart. Anaphase, apart. In telophase, my nucleus reappears. So I have 2 new nuclei. Telophase, 2 new nuclei. Because my chromosomes are now contained again, my DNA can uncoil, and then my spindle disappeared. It's done its job. We're good to go. Once I have those two new nuclei in this little like peanut-shaped cell, we can go through cytokinesis, which is when the cytoplasm divides. So my cell pinches and divides into two daughter cells. And that's the goal of mitosis. Mitosis is trying to take one cell and make two identical cells. For example, we don't want our skin cells to become a stomach cell. That doesn't make sense. We want another skin cell to take the place of that dead skin cell that was there originally. Now, cancer is when this mitosis is out of control. When we don't have control over this process, we get cancer. There's a lot of research being done about why this occurs, and some of it may be genetic links, some of it runs in families. Others might be exposure to toxins, exposure to UV and radiation. This uncontrolled growth that cancers have give rise to more cells that are mutated or out of control. And then we develop this tumor, which you can see over here, just this mass of a lot of cells. Some tumors stay put, others do not. These cancer cells do not securely anchor themselves like other cells do. They don't die if there's damage. Instead, they continue to replicate. Now, thankfully, scientists are continuing to develop better treatments for this, which includes destroying the cancer cells with radiation or medication. And some medication, like chemotherapy, targets cells that are dividing frequently. It's targeting these cells in mitosis. Maybe someday you can be a part of helping meet the challenge of trying to eliminate cancer, because the fact remains is that we don't have a whole cure yet. These cells are not participating in the cell cycle like they should, and we need to figure out how to better treat them. Back to you, regular Miss Judd.
Wow, I feel like I've just learned so much valuable information. Thank you, Miss Judd in the corner. At this point, we should have our Unit 2, Lesson 2 notes handwritten. Remember that we need to upload this to our Seesaw. We have an Ed puzzle to review on mitosis. And after that, we're done. Great work, you guys. As always, I'm so proud of you. Have a great day and make good choices.